Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Trey Gowdy and it's Sunday night in America. Joe Biden was supposed to be the most experienced president in our lifetime on matters of foreign policy. That's what we were told. But as we have learned the hard way over the past weeks, experience and competence are two different things. Biden was tragically wrong in Afghanistan. He ridiculed the prospect of the Taliban taking over quickly. He said Kabul was not under immediate threat. He said the airport was safe. He said all Americans will be out and our allies will be protected. In his rush to leave Afghanistan, Americans were left behind. Our military equipment was left behind. And I fear part of America's reputation was left behind too. As America and our allies try to make sense of this deadly withdrawal, the Taliban is rejoicing. They fired the guns America bought and left behind in celebration. They held mock funerals with coffins draped with American flags. America hurried out and depravity rushed in. Members of the Taliban are going door to door, carrying out executions and hunting those translators and allies who helped us for 20 years. So for those wondering what will happen if you align yourself with the United States, the answer for some is this: you'll be left behind and on your own. The long history of Joe Biden being wrong on matters of foreign policy is enhanced. The same man who wanted to wait to kill Osama bin Laden hurried to get out of the country that aided and abetted Osama bin Laden. Joe Biden told you that America is back. It doesn't seem that way, does it? It looks like America is gone and the Taliban is back. Joining me now is someone who knows about the killing of Osama bin Laden. He's the host of Fox News Sunday and a best-selling author whose new book, Countdown Bin Laden, The Untold Story of the 247-day hunt to bring the mastermind of 9/11 to justice, comes out on Tuesday. Chris Wallace, thank you for joining us.
Trey, thank you so much for having me.
Chris, is there a meaningful distinction? I mean, you're an expert on these matters, but for just us normal viewers, is there a distinction between the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a distinction. The Al-Qaeda obviously was the group, of Islamic jihadists that perpetrated 9/11. ISIS is a rival group, and the Taliban is a rival group allied with Al-Qaeda, but at odds with ISIS. But Trey, I got to tell you something that is in my new book, and it's told for the first time, that goes directly to your point about Joe Biden. You know how, if you remember, Bob Gates, the former defense secretary, wrote in his memoir that Joe Biden had been wrong about every major foreign policy decision for the last 40 years. Well, he had said that to people in the administration. And on April 28th of 2011, they're having a meeting in the Situation Room. Are they going to go attack bin Laden, the compound? They don't know if bin Laden's there or not. And Biden and Gates are the only two top officials who speak out about this. And on the way back to the Pentagon, Gates is riding back with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mike Mullen. And Mike Mullen says, hey, how you've told me that Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy decision for the last 40 years. Well, how come you're agreeing with him on not going after bin Laden? So this was a subject of some concern, Joe Biden's bona fides on foreign policy, even when he was vice president of the United States.
Chris, you raise a good point. I mean, did he have a justification for wanting to wait to kill bin Laden? I mean, did he think American soldiers would be at increased risk? What was the rationale for waiting?
I think there were two reasons. One was because there was not hard evidence that bin Laden was even there. It was a circumstantial case. When President Obama makes a decision, some people are saying it's 40%, some people say it's 60%. He says, look, forget the percentages, it's 50-50. Either he's there or he's not. And there were two things weighing against it. One, maybe if you wait longer, you can get more and better intelligence, although they've been trying for 8 months and hadn't found, the smoking gun that he was there. And the second thing was there was a real chance, first of all, the risk of the mission. If he is there, there's a real risk. But even if he isn't, you're going to be going into Pakistan, 162 miles inside Pakistan, without telling the Pakistani government. We were depending a lot on the Pakistani to give us the supply lines, the routes to send supplies into our troops fighting the war in Afghanistan. And the concern was that, we don't know that we're going to get them, and we could really tick off the Pakistanis, and they'll cut off our access to Afghanistan. But I will tell you, while he said that, and Gates was also against it, everybody else, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mullen, CIA Director Panetta, Hillary Clinton, National Security Advisor Tom Donilon, all of them were for it.
Chris, you mentioned the former chair of the Joint Chiefs. Let me play you a quote from the current chair of the Joint Chiefs and get your reaction to it on the other side.
We don't know what the future of the Taliban is, but I can tell you from personal experience that this is a ruthless group from the past, and whether or not they change remains to be seen. In war, you do what you must in order to reduce risk to mission and force, not what you necessarily want to do.
Any possibility of coordination against ISIS-K with them?
It's possible.
To be sure, Chris, it looks like presidents, past and present, were willing to deal with the Taliban.
Yeah, I mean, look, President Trump made the deal. Secretary of State Pompeo was the first American Secretary of State to meet with the Taliban and conclude a peace treaty. And look, I don't think anybody has any illusions about the Taliban. They're a vicious, bloodthirsty group. They gave safe haven to al-Qaeda when they attacked the U.S. homeland on 9/11. But, sometimes you want to put them to the test and see. So I suspect it won't be a government acceptance of them and formal recognition. But, I could see conceivably, given the fact that there are different factions and the Taliban and ISIS-K are at odds with each other, that, if the Taliban helps us take out ISIS-K, or we can help them take out ISIS-K, we might test that to see whether or not it's going to happen. One of the points I do want to make, Trey, about my book, look, we all feel lousy. I think almost all Americans do, not about getting out, but the way we got out, the fact that there are hundreds of Americans left and tens of thousands of Afghans. But, the bin Laden takedown in 2011 was a success. We took down the mastermind of 9/11. We degraded al-Qaeda. There was not an attack on the U.S. homeland that emanated out of Afghanistan for 20 years, and we could take real pride in that. And this is a history thriller. I take you behind the scenes, the intel community, the military community, the political community working together flawlessly, as poorly as they did this year and these last few weeks. They worked together flawlessly to launch and succeed in this mission.
Well, Chris, congratulations on your book. I can tell you all the divisiveness. I think there's complete unity on wanting to have Osama bin Laden gone, and I look forward to reading the real story of how that happened.
Trey, thank you so much. I think you'll enjoy it. You know how the story ends, but I promise you'll be turning the pages, the last 100 pages, to say what happens next.
Good. I look forward to it. Thank you for joining us. Coming up, a quote, perception that the Taliban weren't winning, whether or not it's true. Biden's perception around the world took a tumble. Our closest allies, ones that have stood by us for 20 years as we waged multiple wars in the Middle East, criticized Biden's disastrous and now deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan.
To see their commander-in-chief call into question the courage of men I fought with, to claim that they ran, it's shameful.
World leaders from France, Germany, England, including our next guest, all spoke out against the United States' decision to withdraw from Afghanistan and the manner in which we did. In some instances, the president didn't even bother to pick up the phone and speak to our allies before the Taliban had complete control of Kabul, symbolizing the end and ultimate failure of our 20-year war. So what did we actually accomplish besides ceding Afghanistan to the Taliban and alienating our allies? Did our decision to leave Afghanistan leave the rest of the world vulnerable? Tom Tugendhat is a member of British Parliament, and he served in Afghanistan. He says emotional wounds have been torn open, and he joins me now. Welcome to you, MP Tugendhat.
Thank you.
I watched your floor speech, and I do want to ask you what you meant by emotional wounds torn open, but you used another word that really caught my attention, and that is the word abandon. That is a strong word, particularly when the two closest allies in the world are speaking to one another, and that's how Americans view Great Britain. What did you mean by the word abandon?
Well, I was talking specifically about the Afghan people and the sacrifice that many of them have made, and many veterans, whether they be American or British or indeed Australian, French, German, and others have made too. And the feeling amongst many of us in the veteran community is that those efforts, those sacrifices have been abandoned, they've been let slip. And you can see that today in Afghanistan by the fact that it's not a government that respects the citizen that rules in Kabul anymore. It's a vicious terrorist organization.
Well, I would commend your floor speech to anyone who has not seen it. It was passionate, but it was also reasoned, which is a powerful comment. Emotional wounds torn open. You served. Is that what you were referring to, or were you referring to something else when you said emotional wounds torn open?
Well, it's, for many people, and I mean, really for me, it's a really strong feeling of grief. We buried a lot of friends, and we've now walked away from others. I served alongside Afghan troops who fought just as hard as any other I served alongside. They fought courageously alongside the 82nd in Lusakala. They fought courageously alongside the Royal Marines in Sangin. I saw time and again Afghan troops finding incredibly hard. And they, to see them abandoned, it reawakens the feeling of, frankly, the feeling of betrayal that a lot of us feel.
The debate in America is over who had the better withdrawal plan. Is there an argument coming from an ally who served? Is there an argument that we should have maintained a presence? We should not have withdrawn at all?
Look, there is a strong argument for that. I understand what the team in the White House are thinking. I get that they want to focus on the clear threat that we're seeing from China, and as you know, the China Research Group, which I chair in the UK Parliament, has been warning very strongly about the different ways in which the Chinese Communist Party is threatening the liberties that we enjoy. So I understand that attempted focus, but the reality is that Afghanistan is part of the building block of our liberty, and keeping 2,500 US troops in Afghanistan, 750 British troops, compare it with the 30,000 we have in South Korea, the 50,000 in Japan, thousands more in Germany, in Cyprus. It's part of the role of being an international player that you support allies around the world. We do it, you do it. That's what gives us strength and reach. And 3 decisions, sadly, by 3 presidents in the United States in recent years have effectively undermined that strength of the Western alliance. The first was when President Obama put a time limit at the same time as he announced the surge. The second was when President Trump effectively negotiated the unconditional surrender of the United States forces at Doha. And the third was when President Biden left.
Well, MP Tugendhat, thank you for joining us, but most of all, thank you for your service in Afghanistan. The best to you.
Thank you.
Still ahead, it's been nearly 20 years since the terror attacks on September 11, 2001. Actually, a happy morning in our home. September the 11th is my wife's birthday. We got our children ready for school, and then I headed to the courthouse where I was prosecuting a murder case. And then the media reports began to come in over the radio. A plane had struck one of the Twin Towers in New York. I saw a police officer stopped at a gas station and did what many of us do in times of turmoil and uncertainty. I turned to someone in a uniform, and that police officer and I sat together and listened to the radio in stunned silence. A second plane had struck a second tower. When I got to the courthouse, the jury was sequestered, and the judge made the decision not to tell them what was happening. We went on with that murder trial. It was surreal in a sense to act as if life goes on when we all suspected it had really been changed forever. The sense of security we felt as a nation was shattered. This country, bordered by oceans and allies, was attacked. Our way of life was attacked. The way we travel was forever changed. The way we view religion was changed. The world shrunk. Extremism across the globe was now in major U.S. cities. And everything we knew was suddenly at risk. Sporting events and national monuments, the symbols of our government, our very way of life. Terrorism kills, but it also robs. It kills innocent people in a distorted, disjointed view of religion. And it robs those left alive of security, of peace, of the way things used to be. There's no silver lining when it comes to what happened to our country on September the 11th. There's no good that can come from that kind of evil. There's just a residue, a clarifying residue reminding us of what's important in life. And when we think of our fellow Americans trapped in towers, picking whether to burn to death or jump to death, there is clarity in their final acts. There's clarity in their final thoughts, and there is clarity in their final phone calls. And then there is the clarity of what we ask others to do. We ask some to run toward the fire, run toward the destruction, run toward the danger, even if it means your own death. Death and grief and pain can bring clarity about what is important in life, and precisely what it is we are willing to fight to preserve, and from that can come unity. Death and grief and pain can be unifying. And we witnessed that unity in the aftermath of 9/11. Black, brown, and white hands joined together. People of different religions prayed together. Politics did not matter. Geography did not matter. Nothing that divides us or separates us mattered. Whatever differences were previously perceived felt so inconsequential because we were unified in our heartache, we were unified in our resolve, and we were unified in our anger. There was clarity and unity in the aftermath of 9/11. We said we would never forget. We said we would remember forever. We said we would hunt those who hurt us, hunt those who seek to hurt us and destroy our way of life. We said we would hunt them to the ends of the earth. And now, just 20 years later, the unity has been replaced with just the memories of unity. The clarity has been replaced with ambiguity. There are now American politicians who call other Americans terrorists. There are now American politicians who can't seem to tell our friends or American ingenuity designed and you paid for are now in the hands of terrorists in the very region of the world which spawned the attacks on us in the first place. For some, forever turned out to be slightly less than 20 years. And for some, hunting our enemies to the ends of the earth apparently does not include Afghanistan. And for some, the clarity and the unity are long gone. The 20th anniversary of 9/11 may be the ideal time to remind ourselves and each other of what we went through, what our brothers and sisters lost, what our country lost. Great countries should have long memories. We told ourselves we would never forget. We told ourselves we would never forget how we felt the morning of September the 11th, 2001, and every morning thereafter. for weeks and months to come. We pledged to each other we would never forget. Maybe this year is the year we remember that we promised each other we would always remember. In addition to remembering what happened to us on 9/11, we should remember that what we promised each other on 9/11. And maybe in the power and the pain of that recollection, we can find unity once again. Joining me now, the former governor of New Jersey, Tom Kean, who co-chaired the 9/11 Commission. Welcome to you, Governor, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you, Congressman. Good to be here.
Take us back to 20 years. I mean, you've done a lot of remarkable things in your career. The decision to accept the co-chair of this commission and your most vivid memories of your time as co-chair.
Well, most vivid memory, of course, is when the president called and asked me to do it. Henry Kissinger had been asked originally, and then he couldn't do it because of his clients. So I was a second choice. And he called me, asked me if I would chair the commission. And, I felt like a ton of bricks had fallen on me, frankly. I hadn't expected the call. I'd been out of politics for a while. And, but you say yes. When the President of the United States, at a time of national emergency, asks you to do something, you don't think about it, at least I didn't think about it twice. You say yes, and then try to deal with it afterwards.
Governor, it's been 20 years, but I can't help but think there are certain things we need to remind ourselves of that we knew vividly in the aftermath, but maybe our memories have faded. Are there certain things that you wish you could tell everyone in America, hey, you need to remember this?
Well, I think we need to remember at the moment why we went into Afghanistan to begin with, because that's where the terror came from. That's where bin Laden trained the fighters. That's where all the planning originated, and that's where the attack came from. And we went into Afghanistan because we asked the Taliban to give up bin Laden or to stop supporting him. They said no. So we said, if you won't do that, we're coming for him. And that's how the war originally started. It was a war we won at the beginning. We did very, very well. But so now we've got to look at Afghanistan. Is that again going to be a breeding ground for terrorists? Because if it becomes a breeding ground for terrorists again, if Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of those start planning attacks against the homeland again, we're going to have to send troops back in. There's no question about it.
Well, Governor, it sounds like we have come full circle and not in a good way. That we asked the Taliban for something 20 years ago, they said no, and now we're still somewhat dependent upon the good graces of the Taliban 20 years later. But surely there had to be another purpose to going into Afghanistan other than simply killing Osama bin Laden. As you said, it was a breeding ground for terrorism. Has that changed over the last 20 years?
Well, we don't know that yet. And no question that we know that ISIS is there. We know that Al-Qaeda is still there. But whether or not they're breeding grounds, whether or not they're going to plan new attacks on the homeland, we don't know that yet. But they ought to be very plain. We ought to be very plain in our government that we're not going to stand for that. And if there's any chance that people are going to use that territory to plan another attack in the United States, then American forces will be back to prevent it and to crush anybody who plans it.
Governor, let me ask you one final question. I can't imagine the political atmosphere 20 years ago, but there had to be a certain apoliticalness, a certain bipartisanship for you to be able to do what you did with your co-chair. Is there any hope of recapturing that environment in our country as divided as we've seen?
It seems to be more difficult, but remember the couple of things we had in the commission. We were all, in a sense, ex-politicians. None of us were running for office anymore. A reformed politician, my vice chairman, Lee Hamilton, called us. So we were, that was one thing. And secondly, there was an atmosphere of getting to the bottom of it. And the families of 9/11 were an incredible force. They were the wind in our sails, and those families supported us every step of the way. And still, when I testified for Congress, the families always came out to support me. So we had all that going for us, and the unity of the country. And we ended up, I think it's the last major thing, maybe in this country, where 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats agreed in a unanimous report, and the United States Congress then implemented the report, and we are safer in this country today because of it.
Well, Governor, I hope that is not the last moment of unity that our country has, but if it is, it was in part because of your leadership, and we thank you for your leadership on that. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Congressman.
Young heroes of 9/11. As we embark on this new week, marking 20 years since the attacks on America, we take a closer look at the largest water evacuation in American history, one of the lesser-known stories of that fateful day. On September 11, 2001, as New York City came under attack, bridges, tunnels, and public transit shut down, leaving hundreds of thousands of people in lower Manhattan suddenly stranded.
I saw just hundreds and hundreds of people flooding. Some were in panic mode, running. Some had just come out of the subways and were just standing.
Coast Guard Reserve Captain Dan Croce, working in the area, quickly sounded the alarm.
And I realized I really need to reach out to the command center at the Coast Guard to tell them the only way we're going to get all these people out of here is by water.
As first responders rushed to the scene, the U.S. Coast Guard made a radio call asking all nearby boaters for help.
All available boats, this is the United States Coast Guard. Anyone want to help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan, report to Governor's Island.
And the help they did.
Everything that floated was out there. Tugboats, ferry boats, passenger boats, yachts.
Within minutes, a volunteer fleet of mariners converged on the city.
In sort of a V formation, there were tugs, there were personal private boats.
There was tugboats, fire boats, police boats, private boats, fishing boats from down Monmouth County, from Long Island. Everyone just stepped up and brought people home. Took home people that were injured. I mean, took them to triage centers.
New York waterway ferries were some of the first private boats on the scene.
Everyone who worked for this company stepped in and pitched in and just started running. They were instructed, get people to New Jersey as quickly as you can, take the shortest route. Then as people started to come to the waterfront, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people, the whole industry stepped up. Boats from Long Island, South Jersey, pretty amazing.
Circle Line tour boats quickly became emergency water shuttles.
I leave, another boat will pull in, like that all day. You know, I could see it in their eyes, they were frightened.
When we loaded up a boat, we cleared all the chairs to load up as many people as we could, you know, all kinds of space. So everybody was standing, and we went across the river, right about halfway across the Hudson. You look down, and you can actually see all the smoke in the collapsed towers, and that was just horrifying.
We got the approval from the Coast Guard to man any boat you can with guys that are capable of doing the job. So if you have a guy who's a captain that's in training and he's able to handle a boat, put him on a boat and use him for evacuation.
In all, the makeshift armada, made up of first responders along with more than 100 private boats, would come to the rescue, evacuating nearly 500,000 people in less than 9 hours.
Oh God, it was people covered in dust downtown. People hurt, people climbing over the fences. It was pretty intense.
It wasn't planned, it wasn't practiced, it wasn't orchestrated.
The Great Boat Lift, as it's come to be known, now marks the largest sea evacuation in modern history. Larger than Dunkirk during World War II, when nearly 339,000 Allied troops evacuated from France by private boats over 9 days.
Yeah, common thread is that people in deep down are all good people, and they all want to do things to help other people.
They all were heroes. Everyone, they may not think themselves, because there's so much humility in this industry. it definitely helped save lives.
Only in New York City. In Shanksville, Pennsylvania, 40 brave Americans on Flight 93 fought directly against terrorist hijackers and prevented what many people believe would have been an attack on the United States Capitol. A tribute to those heroes stands in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where the plane crashed that morning. My next guest spearheaded this memorial. Architect Paul Murdoch joins me now. Welcome to you, Mr. Murdoch.
Thank you, Trey. Nice to be here.
What did you learn as you were designing